The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace sparkled under crystal chandeliers as Catherine Middleton adjusted her emerald tiara one last time. Tonight marked the 15th anniversary of her marriage to Prince William, and the entire royal family had gathered to celebrate. She smiled graciously at the guests, her practiced royal wave acknowledging diplomats, celebrities, and nobility from across Europe. But beneath her composed exterior, Catherine felt the weight of recent whispers that had been circulating through the palace corridors. King Charles had been showing signs of fatigue lately. At 75, the monarch who had waited decades for his crown was beginning to slow down. Palace staff noticed his shorter public appearances, the way he leaned more heavily on his walking stick, and how Queen Camilla had taken on more of his ceremonial duties. The royal physicians maintained their professional silence, but the knowing glances between senior courtiers told a different story. William stood beside his father during the evening speeches, his jaw set in that familiar way Catherine had learned to recognize over their years together. He was worried, though he would never admit it publicly. The burden of being heir apparent had always been heavy, but lately, it felt like the crown itself was pressing down on his shoulders even before it was officially his to wear. Catherine watched her husband's face as Charles delivered his anniversary toast. The king's voice was strong tonight, his words carefully chosen and delivered with the authority that came from decades of preparation. Yet she noticed the subtle tremor in his left hand as he raised his champagne glass, the way his breath caught slightly between sentences. These were details invisible to the hundreds of guests, but Catherine had trained herself to observe everything. Princess Anne approached Catherine during a quiet moment between dances. The Princess Royal had always been direct in her communication, never one for pleasantries when serious matters needed discussion. "We need to talk," Anne said quietly, guiding Catherine toward a less crowded corner of the ballroom. "Things are moving faster than anyone anticipated. Charles has made some decisions that will affect us all." The music continued to play, couples swirled across the polished floor, and champagne glasses clinked in celebration. But Catherine felt the world shift slightly beneath her feet. She had been preparing for this moment since the day she married William, knowing that someday the crown would pass to him, and with it, to her. But she had always imagined it happening much later, perhaps decades in the future when they were older and more experienced. Anne's words confirmed what Catherine had been sensing for weeks. The king had been having private meetings with the Archbishop of Canterbury, lengthy discussions with the Prime Minister, and quiet conversations with the Queen Consort that ended abruptly whenever other family members entered the room. The machinery of succession was already in motion, even if the public remained unaware. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and the ballroom had been cleared, William found Catherine in their private sitting room. She was still wearing her evening gown, but she had removed the tiara and was holding it in her hands, studying its intricate design. The emeralds caught the lamplight, casting green shadows across her fingers. "Father wants to see us tomorrow morning," William said, loosening his white tie. "He's calling a family meeting." "The immediate family only," Catherine nodded, having expected this news. The signs had been building for months, and tonight's conversation with Anne had simply confirmed what she already suspected. They sat together in comfortable silence, both understanding that their lives were about to change dramatically. Catherine thought about their 3 children, sleeping peacefully upstairs. George, at 10, was already showing the serious nature that would serve him well as a future king. Charlotte, 8, had her grandmother Diana's warmth and natural connection with people. Little Louis, still only 5, remained blissfully unaware of the royal destiny that awaited him. William reached for her hand, and Catherine felt the familiar comfort of his touch. They had faced many challenges together during their marriage, from the intense media scrutiny of their courtship to the pressures of royal duties and parenthood. But this felt different. This was the moment they had always known would come, yet somehow it still felt sudden and overwhelming. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, though they both knew readiness was irrelevant. The crown didn't wait for convenient timing or personal preparation. It simply passed from one generation to the next when circumstances demanded it. Catherine looked at the tiara in her hands, then at her husband's concerned face. She thought about all the royal women who had come before her, who had faced similar moments of transition and uncertainty, Queen Elizabeth II had become queen at 25, thrust into the role by her father's unexpected death. Queen Victoria had been even younger, just 18 when she inherited the throne. "I've been ready since the day we met," Catherine replied, and she realized it was true. Every royal engagement, every state dinner, every public appearance had been preparation for this moment. Every interaction with world leaders, every charity patronage, every carefully worded speech had been building toward the day when she would stand beside William, not just as his wife, but as his queen. The palace around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the ancient walls themselves understood that change was coming. In a few hours, the sun would rise on what might be one of the last normal days of their current life. Tomorrow's family meeting would set in motion events that would transform them from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge into something far more significant and far more scrutinized. Catherine carefully placed the tiara on the side table and stood up. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, new challenges, and a new role that would define the rest of her life. But tonight she was still simply William's wife. Still the mother who would check on her sleeping children before going to bed. Still the woman who had fallen in love with a prince and was about to discover what it truly meant to stand beside a king. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the blue drawing room as Catherine entered to find the immediate royal family already assembled. King Charles sat at the head of an ornate mahogany table, his back straight despite the weariness in his eyes. Queen Camilla sat to his right, her usual warm smile replaced by an expression of quiet concern. Princess Anne was present, as were Prince Edward and Sophie, all wearing the serious faces reserved for family discussions that would change everything. William squeezed Catherine's hand briefly as they took their seats. The formal atmosphere felt unusual for a family gathering, but Catherine understood that this was no ordinary morning conversation. Charles had requested that no staff be present, not even his most trusted private secretary. Whatever was about to be discussed would remain within the family until decisions were made. "Thank you all for coming," Charles began, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken news. "I've asked Dr. Henderson to brief us on recent developments regarding my health. What I'm about to share must remain confidential until we've had time to plan appropriately." Catherine felt her stomach tighten. Dr. Henderson, the royal physician, was not someone who delivered routine updates. His presence meant something significant had changed in the king's medical condition. She glanced at William, whose face had gone pale, though he maintained his composure with practiced royal discipline. Dr. Henderson opened his leather folder and spoke with clinical precision. The tests from the previous month had revealed early signs of a progressive neurological condition. While not immediately life-threatening, it would gradually affect the king's cognitive abilities and motor functions. Charles had insisted on full transparency about his diagnosis, both with his family and eventually with the British public. The room fell silent except for the steady ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Catherine absorbed this information while watching the faces around the table. Anne's expression was stoic but supportive. Edward looked shocked, and Camilla appeared to be fighting back tears. This explained the recent changes in Charles's behavior, the shorter public appearances, and the increased reliance on written notes during speeches. "The progression varies from person to person," Dr. Henderson continued. "His Majesty may have months or potentially several years of relatively normal function. However, the demands of the monarchy require split-second decision-making, extensive travel, and countless public engagements. We must consider when those responsibilities might become challenging." Charles raised his hand to interrupt the physician. "What Dr. Henderson is diplomatically avoiding saying is that I need to begin planning my abdication. Not immediately, but sooner than any of us anticipated." The word abdication hung in the air like a thunderclap. In British royal history, abdication was associated with scandal and crisis, most notably with Edward VIII in 1936. William finally found his voice. "Father, surely there are accommodations we can make. Reduced schedules, shared responsibilities." "I've given this considerable thought," Charles replied firmly. "I've waited my entire life to be king, and I refuse to disgrace the crown by clinging to it when I can no longer serve effectively. The monarchy must be strong, especially during these challenging times our nation faces." Catherine watched this exchange between father and son, understanding that she was witnessing a pivotal moment in British history. Charles was making an unprecedented decision, one that would reshape not only their family but the entire institution of the monarchy. His choice showed remarkable wisdom and selflessness, even as it thrust enormous responsibility onto William and herself far earlier than expected. Anne leaned forward, her practical nature taking charge of the conversation. What timeline are we considering? We'll need to coordinate with the government, prepare the public gradually, and ensure a smooth transition. This can't appear sudden or create constitutional uncertainty. Charles nodded appreciatively at his sister's directness. I propose we use the next 6 months to gradually transfer more responsibilities to William and Catherine. We'll increase their public profile, have them take on more state functions, and begin the careful process of preparing the nation for change. Catherine realized that everyone was looking at her, waiting for her response. This was the moment when she could speak up, express concerns, or ask for more time. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. All those years of preparation, all those lessons in protocol and constitutional law, all those public appearances had led to this moment. What do you need from us? She asked simply, her voice steady and clear. William turned to look at her with surprise and admiration. She had just accepted the greatest responsibility a person could bear in British society, without hesitation or conditions. Charles smiled at his daughter-in-law with genuine pride. I need you both to be ready to take on duties that typically require decades of preparation. Catherine, you'll need to accelerate your understanding of constitutional matters. William, you'll be working directly with the Prime Minister on matters of state much sooner than anticipated. The conversation continued for another 2 hours, covering practical matters, security considerations, and the complex process of managing public perception. Catherine learned that she would be meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury to discuss her future coronation, with constitutional scholars to understand her role as Queen Consort, and with the heads of her future household staff. As the meeting concluded, Camilla approached Catherine privately. I know this feels overwhelming, the Queen Consort said gently. When I married Charles, I never imagined I'd be queen. The role changes you in ways you can't anticipate, but it also reveals strengths you didn't know you possessed. Catherine appreciated Camilla's honesty. Despite the rocky beginning of Camilla's relationship with the royal family, she had proven herself to be a dedicated and effective Queen Consort. Her advice would be invaluable during the transition period. That afternoon, Catherine found herself in the palace library, surrounded by constitutional law books and historical accounts of previous royal transitions. She was no longer simply studying to be a well-informed duchess. She was preparing to be Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms, a role that would define not only her own future, but that of her children and grandchildren. The weight of this responsibility was enormous, but Catherine discovered that she felt ready for the challenge. Years of public service, combined with William's love and support, had prepared her more than she had realized. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new responsibilities, and new challenges, but she would face them with the same grace and determination that had carried her through every stage of her royal journey. 3 months had passed since the family meeting that changed everything, and Catherine could feel the subtle shift in how people treated her throughout the palace. Staff members lingered slightly longer when delivering reports, their eyes holding a new respect mixed with anticipation. Foreign diplomats requested audiences with both William and her, rather than just William alone. Even the household staff seemed more attentive, understanding that they were witnessing history in the making. Catherine stood in her private study, reviewing briefing papers from the Foreign Office. The stack had grown considerably larger in recent weeks as she prepared to take on more substantial diplomatic roles. Tomorrow she would host her first independent state meeting with the President of France's wife, discussing cultural exchanges and charitable initiatives between their nations. It was a carefully orchestrated step in her gradual transition toward queenly duties. The children had begun to notice changes in their routine as well. George, now 10 and increasingly perceptive, had asked why his parents were spending more time in meetings and less time at family dinners. Catherine and William had agreed to maintain as much normalcy as possible in their children's lives while they navigated this transition period. "Mummy, are you going to be queen soon?" Charlotte had asked the previous evening during bedtime stories. The question was so direct and innocent that Catherine had struggled to find an age-appropriate answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her grandfather is ill, her father will become king, and her entire life is about to change in ways she couldn't possibly understand? William entered the study carrying his own stack of government papers, looking tired but determined. He had been meeting daily with the Prime Minister, receiving briefings on international affairs and learning the intricacies of constitutional monarchy that his father had mastered over decades. The transition was demanding on both of them, but particularly challenging for William, who was essentially learning to be king while still serving as heir apparent. "The Archbishop wants to meet with us next week," William said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "He's concerned about the timing of the transition and wants to ensure we're spiritually prepared for the coronation ceremony." Catherine nodded, though she felt a flutter of nervousness at the mention of coronation. The ceremony would be one of the most watched events in modern history, broadcast to billions of people worldwide. She would walk into Westminster Abbey as the Duchess of Cambridge and emerge as Queen Catherine, anointed and crowned in a ritual unchanged for centuries. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Princess Anne entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression that suggested important news. Since the family meeting, Anne had become Catherine's unofficial mentor, sharing practical advice about royal duties and helping her navigate the complex relationships within the extended royal family. "I've just come from a meeting with the palace communications team," Anne announced, taking a seat without waiting for invitation. Her direct manner had initially intimidated Catherine, but she had learned to appreciate Anne's honesty and efficiency. "We need to discuss the public preparation strategy. The gradual approach isn't working as well as we hoped." Anne opened her portfolio and spread several newspaper clippings across the desk. The headlines ranged from respectful speculation about increased royal duties to more sensational theories about palace intrigue and secret illnesses. The British press had noticed the subtle changes in royal scheduling and was beginning to ask pointed questions. "The problem," Anne continued, "is that partial information leads to wild speculation. The communications team believes we should consider a more direct approach. Perhaps a carefully planned interview or statement that prepares the public for changes without revealing medical details." Catherine studied the newspaper headlines, feeling the weight of public scrutiny that would only intensify once the transition became official. She had experienced media attention throughout her relationship with William, but this was different. Soon, every decision she made, every outfit she wore, every public statement she gave would be analyzed and debated by millions of people around the world. William leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "What does Father think about accelerating the timeline?" "Charles is concerned about maintaining stability," Anne replied. "He doesn't want the transition to appear rushed or crisis-driven, but he also recognizes that uncertainty can be more damaging than planned change. He's asked me to coordinate with both of you on finding the right balance." Catherine felt a sudden clarity about their situation. They were trying to manage an unprecedented transition while maintaining the dignity and stability that the monarchy represented. It required delicate timing, careful communication, and absolute unity among all family members. "What if we frame it positively?" Catherine suggested, surprising herself with her boldness. "Instead of focusing on Charles stepping back, we emphasize William and me stepping up, a new generation taking on greater responsibilities to serve the nation's future." Anne's eyes lit up with approval. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that would serve Catherine well as queen. The ability to see beyond immediate challenges and find constructive narratives was essential for modern monarchy. Over the following 2 hours, they developed a comprehensive plan for the next phase of transition. Catherine would begin undertaking solo state visits, starting with Commonwealth nations where she could build relationships and gain experience in independent diplomatic work. William would assume more ceremonial duties from his father, particularly those requiring extensive travel or long public appearances. The plan also included increased visibility for their charitable work, positioning them as a dynamic young couple, ready to address contemporary challenges facing Britain and the Commonwealth. Catherine's background in early childhood development would be highlighted, along with William's environmental advocacy and mental health initiatives. As Anne prepared to leave, she turned to Catherine with a rare smile. You're handling this transition better than anyone expected, including myself. The monarchy needs modernization, and you and William represent the future the institution needs." That evening, Catherine stood on the balcony of their private apartments, looking out over the palace gardens. The ancient trees seemed to whisper stories of all the royal women who had walked these grounds before her, facing their own moments of transformation and responsibility. She thought about Queen Elizabeth II, who had become queen at such a young age and served with unwavering dedication for 7 decades. She thought about Queen Victoria, who had transformed the monarchy during an era of great change. She even thought about Diana, whose legacy of compassion and public service had influenced Catherine's own approach to royal duties. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new steps toward her future role as queen. But tonight, Catherine felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The crown might be slipping away from one generation, but she was prepared to lift it with grace, dignity, and determination to serve her nation and its people with honor. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Windsor Castle as Catherine prepared for what would become known as the most significant royal interview in decades. The BBC's veteran royal correspondent sat across from her in the oak-paneled library, cameras positioned to capture the historic moment when the future queen would address the nation about the impending transition. 6 months had passed since the family meeting that set everything in motion, and the gradual transfer of responsibilities had proceeded exactly as planned. Catherine had successfully completed her first solo state visit to Canada, where she had been received with enthusiasm and respect. William had taken on more ceremonial duties, and King Charles had begun stepping back from the most demanding aspects of his role. The public had started to notice these changes, and speculation in the media had reached a point where official clarification was necessary. Rather than allowing rumors to continue growing, the royal family had decided that Catherine should speak directly to the people she would soon serve as their queen. "Your Royal Highness," the interviewer began, "the British people have observed significant changes in royal duties over the past months. Can you help us understand what these changes mean for the future of the monarchy?" Catherine had rehearsed this moment countless times with the palace communications team, but now that the cameras were rolling, she felt the full weight of her words. Millions of people would watch this interview, analyzing every gesture and inflection for clues about the royal family's plans. "The monarchy has always evolved to serve the needs of each generation," Catherine replied, her voice steady and confident. "King Charles has shown remarkable dedication to this nation throughout his reign, and he continues to serve with distinction. However, he has also shown great wisdom in recognizing that the future requires fresh energy and new perspectives." The interviewer leaned forward slightly, sensing the importance of Catherine's carefully chosen words. "Are you suggesting that major changes are planned for the royal family?" Catherine paused, knowing that her next words would make headlines around the world. "Prince William and I are honored to take on increased responsibilities in service of the British people and the Commonwealth. This is a natural progression that strengthens the monarchy and ensures continuity for future generations." Behind the cameras, senior palace staff watched with intense focus. This interview was being broadcast simultaneously across the Commonwealth realms, and foreign diplomats were undoubtedly analyzing every word for implications about Britain's future direction. The conversation continued for 30 minutes, covering Catherine's vision for modern monarchy, her commitment to charitable causes, and her understanding of the constitutional role she would soon assume. She spoke about the importance of connecting with young people, addressing social challenges, and maintaining the traditions that made the monarchy a source of stability and continuity. When asked about her personal feelings regarding the transition, Catherine's composure briefly softened. "I feel deeply honored by the trust being placed in Prince William and myself. This is not a responsibility we take lightly, and we are committed to serving with the same dedication and integrity that has characterized the royal family for generations." The interview concluded with Catherine's direct address to the British people. Looking straight into the camera, she spoke with quiet conviction about her commitment to serve, her respect for the institution of monarchy, and her determination to be a queen who understood and responded to the needs of modern Britain. Within hours of the interview's broadcast, social media was filled with reactions ranging from excitement about Catherine's poise and intelligence to concern about what this transition meant for King Charles's health. The palace had expected mixed reactions, but the overall response was remarkably positive. International newspapers praised Catherine's handling of the interview, noting her obvious preparation and genuine commitment to her future role. The President of the United States called Downing Street to express America's continued support for the special relationship between the two nations. Commonwealth leaders issued statements of confidence in the royal family's leadership during this period of transition. That evening, Catherine joined the family for a private dinner at Buckingham Palace. King Charles looked tired but pleased as he congratulated her on the interview's success. "You handled that beautifully," he told her with genuine pride. "The monarchy needs someone who can communicate clearly with the people, and you've proven yourself today." Queen Camilla agreed enthusiastically. "You struck exactly the right tone, respectful of tradition but forward-looking. The public needs to see that the monarchy isn't just surviving, but thriving as it adapts to new circumstances." William squeezed Catherine's hand under the table, his pride evident in his smile. They had spent weeks preparing for this interview together, discussing potential questions and rehearsing responses. Seeing Catherine succeed in such a high-pressure situation reinforced his confidence in their partnership as they approached their future roles. The children, who had been kept largely unaware of the interview's significance, chattered excitedly about seeing their mother on television. George had watched portions of the broadcast and asked thoughtful questions about what it meant for their family. Charlotte was more interested in her mother's outfit and jewelry choices, while Louis was simply excited about being mentioned on television. Later that night, as Catherine reviewed news coverage of the interview in her private study, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. She had evolved from a senior royal family member to a future queen actively preparing to lead the nation. The interview marked a public acknowledgement of this transition, making it real in a way that private family meetings could not. The response from the British public had been overwhelmingly positive, with polls showing strong support for Catherine's approach to her future role. Messages of encouragement poured in from around the world, and charitable organizations expressed excitement about working with her in expanded capacities. Most importantly, the interview had achieved its intended purpose of preparing the nation for change while maintaining stability and continuity, rather than creating uncertainty or anxiety. Catherine's words had provided reassurance that the monarchy would continue to serve Britain's interests under strong and capable leadership. As she turned off the lights in her study, Catherine realized that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer simply preparing to be queen someday in the distant future. She was actively transitioning into that role, with the support and confidence of the British people. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but tonight she felt ready for whatever lay ahead in her journey toward the crown. Spring had arrived at Buckingham Palace when King Charles made his final decision. The cherry blossoms in the palace gardens were in full bloom, their delicate pink petals creating a beautiful backdrop for what would be one of the most significant days in modern British history. Catherine stood in her dressing room, preparing for the formal announcement that would change everything. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparation. Following the success of her televised interview, Catherine had taken on even more responsibilities, including chairing meetings with Commonwealth representatives and hosting visiting dignitaries. Each successful engagement had built her confidence and demonstrated to the palace staff, government officials, and the public that she was ready for the crown. William's role had expanded even further, with daily briefings from intelligence services, regular meetings with the Prime Minister, and increasingly complex constitutional responsibilities. The transition had been so gradual and well managed that when King Charles finally announced his decision to abdicate, it felt like a natural progression rather than a shocking revelation. Catherine's personal dresser helped her into a navy blue dress, suit that had been specifically chosen for its combination of formality and approachability. Every detail of her appearance had been carefully considered, from her understated jewelry to her perfectly styled hair. Today's announcement would be photographed and analyzed by media around the world, and her image needed to convey confidence, dignity, and readiness for the enormous responsibility she was about to assume. Princess Anne knocked on the door before entering, carrying a small velvet box. "From Charles," she explained simply, opening it to reveal a delicate diamond brooch that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, he wanted you to wear something that connects you to the monarchy's history as you step into its future. Catherine accepted the brooch with genuine emotion, understanding the symbolic importance of this gesture. King Charles was formally passing not just the crown, but the accumulated wisdom and traditions of centuries of royal service. The weight of this inheritance felt both humbling and inspiring. The Great Hall of Buckingham Palace had been transformed for the formal announcement. Representatives from Parliament, the Church of England, Commonwealth governments, and the diplomatic community filled the ornate space. Television cameras positioned throughout the room would broadcast the ceremony to millions of viewers worldwide. As Catherine entered the hall beside William, she felt the collective attention of everyone present focus on them. These were the people who would work with them, serve under them, and help them govern effectively. Their faces showed a mixture of anticipation, respect, and curiosity about the new era that was beginning. King Charles stood at a podium beneath portraits of previous monarchs, his presence commanding despite the fatigue that had become more noticeable in recent weeks. His decision to abdicate was motivated by wisdom rather than weakness, and his dignified handling of this transition would be remembered as one of his greatest contributions to the monarchy. Today marks both an ending and a beginning, Charles began, his voice carrying clearly throughout the hall. After careful consideration and with the full support of my family, I have decided to abdicate the throne in favor of my son William and his wife Catherine. This decision comes not from any diminishment of my love for this nation, but from my deep commitment to ensuring that the monarchy continues to serve Britain with strength and vigor. The formal language of abdication followed, with constitutional procedures that had been carefully reviewed by legal experts and government officials. But beyond the technical requirements, Charles's words carried genuine emotion as he spoke about his pride in William and Catherine's readiness for their new roles. Catherine listened to every word, knowing that this moment would be remembered in history books for generations to come. When Charles invited William to step forward and accept the formal transfer of royal authority, she felt her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. William's acceptance speech was brief but powerful, acknowledging the honor of serving as king, while recognizing the enormous responsibility this role entailed. When he turned to Catherine and extended his hand, inviting her to join him at the podium, she felt the full weight of her transformation from Duchess to Queen. Queen Catherine and I pledge to serve the British people and the Commonwealth with dedication, integrity, and unwavering commitment to the values that have sustained the monarchy through centuries of change, William declared, his voice strong and confident. The applause that followed was sustained and heartfelt, reflecting genuine enthusiasm for the new royal couple. Catherine could see approval and support in the faces throughout the hall, from seasoned politicians who had served multiple monarchs to young diplomatic staff who represented the future generation that she and William would lead. The Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward to offer a blessing for the new reign, his words connecting the formal transfer of power to the spiritual dimensions of monarchy. Catherine bowed her head during the prayer, feeling the profound responsibility of leading not just a nation but a symbol of continuity and service that transcended politics and policy. After the ceremony concluded, Catherine and William received congratulations from hundreds of attendees. Foreign ambassadors expressed their nation's continued friendship and cooperation. Commonwealth representatives spoke enthusiastically about working with the new monarchs on shared challenges and opportunities. The Prime Minister's words were particularly meaningful, as he spoke about the smooth transition and his confidence in the new royal couple's ability to fulfill their constitutional roles effectively. The relationship between Crown and government was crucial to British democracy, and his public support provided important reassurance about political stability during the transition. That evening, Catherine stood once again on the palace balcony, but this time as queen. The crowds gathered below called her name with genuine affection and excitement. The Union Jack flags waved in the spring breeze, and the atmosphere felt celebratory rather than anxious about change. William joined her on the balcony, taking her hand as they waved to the enthusiastic crowd. "How does it feel to be queen?" he asked quietly, his words barely audible over the cheers from below. Catherine considered the question carefully before responding. "It feels like everything we've been preparing for our entire marriage has led to this moment. I'm honored, I'm nervous, but most of all, I'm ready to serve. The transition from Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, to Queen Catherine had been completed. Tomorrow would bring the practical challenges of governing, the complex responsibilities of constitutional monarchy, and the daily work of serving the British people and the Commonwealth. But tonight, as spring flowers bloomed in the palace gardens and crowds celebrated in the streets, Catherine felt confident that she and William were ready to lead the monarchy into a new era of service, dedication, and positive change for their nation and the world. 1 year had passed since the abdication ceremony that transformed Catherine into Queen Catherine, and the anniversary arrived with a sense of quiet accomplishment rather than dramatic fanfare. The transition that many had feared might destabilize the monarchy had instead strengthened it, proving that careful preparation and gradual change could successfully modernize ancient institutions. Queen Catherine stood in her private office, reviewing the agenda for her upcoming state visit to Australia. The walls displayed photographs from her first year as queen, documenting visits to hospitals, schools, and community centers across Britain and the Commonwealth. Each image captured moments of genuine connection between the new queen and the people she served, reflecting a more accessible and engaged royal presence. The challenges of the past year had been significant but manageable. Catherine had navigated complex diplomatic situations, including a trade dispute with European partners and tensions in several Commonwealth nations. Her approach combined traditional royal dignity with modern communication skills, earning praise from foreign leaders and strengthening Britain's international relationships. William entered the office carrying their youngest son, Louis, who had been asking to see Mummy's crown room after hearing older children at school discuss their mother's new role. At 6 years old, Louis was beginning to understand that his family was different from others, though he remained refreshingly unimpressed by royal ceremony when it interfered with playground time. The Prime Minister called, William reported, settling Louis on a comfortable chair with a picture book. Parliament's confidence vote on the new trade agreement passed overwhelmingly. He specifically mentioned how your conversations with Commonwealth leaders helped build the necessary support. Catherine smiled at this news, remembering the hours of careful diplomacy required to balance competing interests among Commonwealth nations. Her role as queen had proven more substantive than many had expected, with real influence on policy development and international relations. The constitutional monarchy allowed her to provide continuity and perspective that complemented the government's political agenda. Princess Anne arrived for their scheduled weekly briefing, bringing updates from various royal charities and organizations. Catherine had maintained her patronage of early childhood development initiatives, while adding new responsibilities focused on Commonwealth education and digital literacy programs. The expansion of her charitable work reflected the increased platform and influence that came with being queen. The University Partnership Program is exceeding expectations, Anne reported with satisfaction. Your personal involvement in recruiting Commonwealth students for British universities has created real opportunities for young people while strengthening cultural ties. It's exactly the kind of practical diplomacy the monarchy should be doing. Catherine appreciated Anne's continued mentorship and practical advice. The Princess Royal had proven invaluable during the transition year, helping Catherine navigate complex protocol issues and palace politics with characteristic directness and efficiency. Their working relationship had evolved into genuine mutual respect and friendship. The conversation was interrupted by excited voices from the palace gardens. George and Charlotte were running across the lawn, chasing after the family's new corgi puppy while their security detail followed at a discreet distance. The children had adapted remarkably well to their parents' new roles, though they still occasionally grumbled about increased security and media attention. They're handling everything better than we expected, William observed, watching their children play. George actually seems to enjoy some of the ceremonial events, and Charlotte has started asking questions about her future role in the family. Catherine nodded, though she remained carefully attentive to any signs of stress or unhappiness in the children. The royal family's experiences with previous generations had taught important lessons about protecting children's emotional well-being while preparing them for public responsibilities. Former King Charles appeared on the garden path, walking slowly but steadily toward the palace. His health had stabilized somewhat since stepping down from royal duties, and he seemed genuinely content with his new role as elder statesman and grandfather. The transition had allowed him to focus on personal interests and family relationships without the constant pressure of state responsibilities. Grandfather Charles looks happy, Louis observed from his chair, having noticed his grandfather's approach through the large windows. The relationship between Charles and his grandchildren had deepened since the abdication, with more opportunities for relaxed family time without the constraints of royal schedules. Catherine reflected on how natural the transition had ultimately felt, despite the enormous changes involved. The skills she had developed as Duchess, combined with intensive preparation and strong family support, had prepared her more thoroughly than she had realized. The British public had embraced her as queen with enthusiasm that continued to surprise and humble her. The economic challenges facing Britain had required careful navigation between royal tradition and modern realities. Catherine had worked closely with government ministers on initiatives supporting small businesses, community development, and international trade. Her role provided opportunities to highlight successful programs and encourage innovation without interfering in partisan political debates. International recognition of Catherine's effectiveness as queen had exceeded expectations. Foreign leaders specifically requested meetings with her during state visits, recognizing her influence and insight into British policy. The Commonwealth nations had responded particularly positively to her leadership, viewing her as a bridge between traditional royal authority and contemporary global challenges. Evening approached with the golden light that made the palace gardens particularly beautiful in late spring. Catherine prepared for a family dinner that would include former King Charles, Queen Camilla, and several other royal family members. These regular gatherings had become more relaxed and enjoyable since the transition, with less formal protocol and more genuine conversation. As she changed from her official day clothes into more casual attire for dinner, Catherine caught sight of her reflection in the antique mirror that had witnessed countless royal transformations over the centuries. The woman looking back at her appeared confident and settled in her role, no longer the nervous bride who had worried about royal protocol and public scrutiny. The journey from Catherine Middleton to Queen Catherine had been long and sometimes challenging, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She had discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, developed relationships that would last a lifetime, and found meaningful ways to serve her nation and the Commonwealth. William joined her as she prepared for dinner, taking her hand in the gesture that had comforted and supported her throughout their marriage. "Any regrets about how quickly everything happened?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. "None at all," Catherine replied without hesitation. "When the crown slipped away from your father, I lifted it because I was ready. Not because I felt ready, but because all our experiences had actually prepared me. The silence in which I accepted this responsibility has allowed me to speak for the nation in ways I never imagined possible." As they walked toward the family dining room, Catherine felt grateful for the path that had brought her to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but she faced them with confidence born from successful experience and the unwavering support of the man who shared both the crown and the burden of leadership in modern Britain.